Hello and welcome to another conversation. Today we have a politician, a social activist. So I'm privileged to introduce you, Kumaran. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, what actually interested you to go into politics? Because I saw that you've done various other aspects of life. Now you have volunteered to do a lot of stuff, and in fact, you wanted to be a writer or to be a journalist. You should be sitting here
Yeah, I should be
interviewing me.
there.
But what made you to actually study into politics?
Lots of people always ask me, what made you study it? What made you get involved? And I suppose there's not one clear answer. It's a combination of things. I was always interested in what was going on around the world. I was always interested in what was going on here at home. And I was always interested in social activism and, ground level issues, things that made a difference to people's everyday lives. I thought, what better thing to study? I was pretty good at it as well, so that helped. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, but for me, I like reading and I like books, and I like understanding the way things worked in terms of our democracy. So I decided to study it. I went on to do that at university. I had no plans of being a politician. If I did, I don't think I would have studied politics.
That made you actually to get into politics in a way. But the social issues, grassroots issues, because it's quite important for you, as you said. But um, there might be an incident or some kind of incident which actually pushed you to think about social issues, like because when you grow up, you would not see the indifferences and all the issues, but at some point as a kid, you would have actually something would have actually triggered that. So, is there any experience of you which had triggered that kind of?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly my family and my experiences growing up. I was lucky. My parents, they came here in the middle of the Civil War. They worked very, very hard. They worked 3 jobs each to rebuild their life and give me a wonderful childhood. I didn't, as you said, Harrow's a great place to live and a great place to grow up. And sometimes you don't see the discrepancies, you don't see inequality, and you don't see various problems that people are facing. So I had a happy childhood. As I was growing up, in my early teens, my father suffered a heart attack. It was near Christmas time. We didn't even plan. He was a very healthy man, and we didn't understand. I didn't realize he was having a heart attack. My mum had just finished working a night shift, so my dad called me and he said, "You should call the ambulance." And I said, "Oh, Appa, you're just making a scene. Stop it. You'll be fine." Half an hour later, you could tell he was starting to get quite ill, and so I called an ambulance. Our ambulance came, took him to our local hospital. Turned out he was having a heart attack. We were in A&E at the time because we didn't know this is what he was going through, so we only took him to A&E. And a passing doctor spotted him, said, "This man's having a second heart attack." They took him on to theatre and they saved his life. And he was back home in time to celebrate Christmas with us and all our friends and our family. And for me, it was that experience, seeing our NHS, seeing how hard our doctors and our nurses worked around the clock to look after him, to bring him back home to us in time for Christmas, to keep my family together. That really, really changed everything for me. And I thought, wow.
So when was this? What age you were in?
I was in year 8 or 9, I think, at the time. So I was about 13, I would have been.
Right. So that actually okay. That explains. That
Yeah,
you
and
to...
I've traveled. My parents used to take me with them traveling, and I've been to India a number of times, to do all the temple visits and do all sorts of things. And then I used to see people queuing to be seen by their doctors, and my parents used to teach me and say to me, "Look, some of these people are too poor to be even treated by a doctor. Some of these people have no way of accessing a doctor because here you have to pay for your healthcare." And we were driving, I think it was to Mahabalipuram or somewhere like that, and there was an overturned truck. It was a sand truck, and there was someone sitting on the truck. And there was no means of an ambulance getting to this person. The family were very poor. And as we were coming back a few days later, we heard from the local driver who was part of that village where he was from, that sadly that gentleman died because their family couldn't put the money together to take him into hospital to be treated. Now,
so we are in a privilege, isn't it?
Yeah.
Having an NHS is fully free and looking after ourselves. So that explains that why you want, and in fact you decided to immediately give back to the NHS because your voluntary work in NHS as a radio presenter.
Yeah.
And so that the radio presenting, because you did writing as well. So radio presenting and writing, is it what kind of information you want to disseminate? Because when somebody wanted to be a presenter,
Yep.
or if you wanted to, hold the mic, especially, you wanted to send a message out. So what was your message at the time?
Well, it's two different things. So when I used to write for Oro paper, which is, a Tamil paper, a big one that goes worldwide. I used to write in the English column. I was very, very adamant that we had a young people's section, and we used to talk about all sorts of things that were relevant to young people, from struggling with a British identity and a Tamil identity and growing up here, to day-to-day perils that teens face or university students face. Written about other things to do with grandparents having to look after their grandchildren, and how more and more people are relying on the mum and dad to look after their kids while they're at work. So touched on a number of topics. Obviously, lots of social justice issues as well, and things around what was going on in Sri Lanka at the time, and also about what we were talking about, human rights, all those sort of things. That was Oro paper time. But when I'm a radio presenter at Northwick Park Hospital, that's completely different. We go and we meet the patients on the wards. We're a befriending service, so we're there to give them some company. We're lucky, Tamil people, we have big families.
So were you playing requests as well?
Yeah, it's a request show. So I'm a DJ.
Oh, the patients will actually
Yes,
ask
yeah, they'll ask we want and what they want to put on.
Right.
We put that in, and we have a call in. They can ring us, they can talk to us. It's really nice. We do the night shift, so we do, our show starts at 9 p.m. So we're the kind of last live show for the night. But it is really, really rewarding, and that's my way of giving back to the hospital that saved my dad's life, giving back to my community, helping, giving a helping hand, which is important.
So initially you said that your parents wanted you to become a doctor. Now, if you were to become a doctor, like in any Asian family background, it's common, like the parents wanted the kids to become doctors. So you would have looked after your family very well. You would have been wealthy, but then you decided to go one step further and get into politics, and you wanted to take this NHS as a key issue in your political career as well. But let's before going into that, let's talk about your university life. You went to Queen Mary's.
I did, yes.
And how was the experience? Because going from Harrow.
Yes.
Because Harrow is a home for many schools, best schools, good schools.
Yes.
9 prime ministers from Harrow.
Something like that, from Harrow School.
Yeah. So going from Harrow to Queen Mary, like, what was your experience?
It feels like a part of Harrow is in Queen Mary, so it's not too different. Queen Mary is a very, very multicultural school. It's a good university to be at. My university life was quite tame, I'd like to say. Had I known I was going to be a politician, it might have been, might have enjoyed a bit more. But it was a good time. It was my first experience living away from home without my parents, as many students find. It was interesting. You learn to, I still didn't really learn to cook much, but you learn to fend for yourself. I made friends from all different parts of the world who, over 10 years later, we're all still friends. It was interesting.
Any key politicians still around the world?
Well, I've got a few friends that are in different parties, shall we say. I've got the housemates that I lived with are brilliant. One's a very high-flying person in a think tank, quite well known. Somebody else has gone on to be a dentist. We've got a few bankers. Someone gone over to Hong Kong and working for one of the big four. So a complete wealth of different things. It's interesting. I'm the only certified politician from the gang. They're all very proud of me as well.
So that like moving from Harrow to all the way to East London, and especially growing up with your parents, and then just moving on, how kind of a transition? Was it a hard thing? Because especially in coming from a Tamil background and an Asian girl moving from home, is the mother still chasing you behind bringing food and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would have survived without my mum's packed lunches. She used to drive over food, and I used to freeze it, and my housemates used to be so happy because they'd get food as well. But they also let me be and let me live and experience what it is like to have your first steps into adulthood and stand on your own 2 feet. Usual experiences any student goes through, but it was interesting. It was fun.
So after that, then you moved on to do a master's in public policy administration.
Just public policy.
Public policy. Any specific ideas then when you were doing that?
Well, the more I studied politics, the more I realised I want to do something in politics behind the scenes. Right. And I thought, I like influencing change, I like affecting change, and I like being part of a process of, being able to see a change. If you see a problem, you should be part of the solution and you should work towards a solution. So I thought, what better way to try and do that than to understand how our policy cycle in this country works? I'm quite a pragmatist, so it's not the most interesting of subjects, but it's very, very necessary if you want to understand the inner workings of the system. So I thought, I'm going to delve right in. It's not often a subject that a young Asian girl does. So I thought, oh, let me do this, let me give it a crack. And as I studied it, the more I studied, the more interested I became on it.
So the interesting part there is that whether your parents and your friends, your families supported you throughout, especially going into a completely a different topic or different subject. So how was the community like? How was the support from your family like?
My family they're very loving. They support me in everything I do, but it would be a lie if I said there weren't some raised eyebrows and some interesting phone calls from our family friends and family saying, oh, so-and-so's gone to do medicine, so-and-so's doing accountancy, law, various subjects, dentistry. What's Uma doing? And it would be the kind of quiet, oh, she's doing politics. And there's lots of, okay, Apriya, what is she going to do after that? And my parents, they definitely struggled with it for a while and said to me, Uma, have you given thought to what you're going to do afterwards? Do you want to be a politician? And there used to be lots of jokes around the dinner table with our family friends saying, yeah, she's going to try and be Prime Minister. And obviously I had no thought of something like that at the time.
There were 7, actually, my producer corrected me, 7 Prime Ministers, so 8 from Harrow.
Well, at the time, I didn't know this. And I used to have a rapid defence even then. I said, yeah, why not? Why can't I be Prime Minister? Why can't I be an MP? But in the back of my head, I was always thinking, oh no, what am I actually going to do afterwards? Because politics is a very, very tough field to crack, even to work in it, let alone be a politician, but just to work.
In fact, that's why I wanted to come in, because when you finished, you decided to join a party or whatever, or a job or whatever it is. How hard it was, getting into a political party, and what made you to choose a party? I mean, there are youngsters out there looking into, they see in the modern politics in Britain, every party is the same. They have the same values, and they're fighting for the same thing, but there are small nuances and small things different. I mean, it's very difficult for youngsters come out, and especially when you come out of university with a different ideal world, but the politics is in such a way, it's quite rigid. And what made you to choose Labour? Is it kind of
it's organic. Look, my family are long-standing Labour Party supporters. My granddad was part of the trade union movement in Sri Lanka. He fought for workers' rights. My other granddad helped people.
So it's mostly the family.
Yeah.
So once you decided, was it hard to get in and actually go through the ranks? Because I'm just asking, in any party in Britain, especially being a woman from an Asian background and actually going through, and age plays a key part.
Definitely. Well, with the family background, I grew up with it. But it's by no means, if my parents told me you have to vote a certain way, it would have happened. Obviously I was shaped by those thoughts and by all of that, but I grew up knowing a very definite story. My parents came here because of a civil war. My parents were able to settle here because it was a Labour MP, Jeremy Corbyn, actually, that took on board their immigration case, helped him settle here. They joined the campaign with him. They became activists at the time with Jeremy. All those things influenced me. And again, like I said, the NHS was a big thing. I know it's the Labour Party that founded the NHS, and it was me thinking, right, I want to be part of a party with these social values that fights for equality, that fights for freedom, that fights to give everybody a voice regardless of how much money they have in their pocket or what their background is. And how could I not have got involved is the question.
Well, you mentioned Jeremy. He's a great man, and he's on his own, in the sense, an independent person taking things up. So it's very easy to get inspired by his work and his continuity. But getting into politics and party is one thing, but getting into candidacy, it is not easy.
No, it's certainly not.
And there might be so many competitors who have actually competed within the party, as well as obviously within the community and all sort of things. Now, I'm not going to ask you how hard that is, because I know everyone knows, but I'm going to ask the mental process, the social side of thing, or what went through your mind. Because people talk about how hard it is, but what went through your mind, and your persistence of it, talk about those kind of aspects.
I'm not going to lie, mentally it is incredibly draining, and it's tough, it's a challenge. But I'm quite a competitive person. If you speak to any of my friends and family, they will say, never play Monopoly or never play Articulate or anything like that with me, because I'm quite ruthless when it comes to winning, and I want to win, and I'm quite competitive. And I suppose it's the same. You decide that you want to do something. So I got it into my head. Lots of people were saying to me, Uma, your hometown is coming up. How can you not go for it? How can you not put your name forward? So I did. I was 26 at the time when I put myself forward. I thought, I don't stand a hope, you know. There are people from up and down the country going into this selection. It's a prime seat. It's a London seat. It's a seat that was Labour for 13 years. It's a seat that we're probably going to win back, is what the predictions are saying. So it's very, very highly competitive. But I thought, you know, why not try? And I did.
And especially the mental process, like, you know, you would have had ups and downs,
Yeah.
and you'd have had good, bad messages. Sometimes you have to actually, you know, swallow this bad messages, and you know, how do you cope up with these kind of times?
You have to get a thick skin pretty quickly. I'm quite a sensitive person naturally. I'm quite, so not sensitive in that I won't start crying straight away, but it affects me, and I'll feel sad about something if I see it. I'm human, you know, it's part of having empathy, and it's part of being a person. You know, politicians are people at the end of the day, but I think we forget that sometimes.
Well, in fact, that's what we want. We want politicians with empathy.
Yes.
And if you know, that's what people are looking for.
Well, yeah, and I think being like that, you are obviously slightly more sensitive to one or two things, but then you realise you're only sensitive to it because you forget the hundreds of good things people say. It's human nature to remember the one sad thing or one bad thing someone might have thrown at you. You have to just learn to ignore it, and also accept that there are people with differing views, and that's part and parcel of politics and life. You have to say, right, you know, I agree, but I can see why you have your view, rather, but I disagree with it, and that's it. Shake hands and move on. I have a good set of friends around me, and my family is very strong, and they keep me very grounded as well as keeping me constantly motivated on the up. I have a brilliant campaign team, and the party as well is very supportive nationally.
Okay, so at any point have you thought that, because the difficulties, at any point you thought, oh, I should have been a man, not a woman, to get in? Have you thought about that?
No, never. I'm proud that I'm a woman who's doing this. It is tougher being a woman.
No, the reason I asked that question is that in politics, you know, it's man's world there, and at some point in your progress that you'd have felt, to pass this hurdle, I should have been a man. Have you ever?
I've never looked at it that way, but there is a thought that, you know, if I was a man, people wouldn't be levelling this at me. If I was a man, they wouldn't have commented first and foremost on a sari that I'm wearing, or, you know, just something to do with appearance, which is what often gets levelled at female politicians. If I was a man, they'd probably take me slightly more seriously, because people are expecting to see male politicians. But that's something we need to change. We can't just sit back and accept that as status quo. So actually, I'm glad that I'm a woman doing it. It's the first time that a woman has ever stood for the Labour Party in Harrow. It's the first time we've ever had a woman standing in a winnable seat in this part of London. It's the first time we've ever had a Tamil candidate. It's the first time we've ever had a young candidate. A number of firsts. And I'm proud to take it on.
Yeah, you have a great challenge as well in your constituency. That you know, I know most of the communities there, especially the Jewish community or the Indian community or the Tamil community. Most of the organizations is filled with men, and you have a big task of changing that mix-up, because the Labour Party and most of the political parties, including the Conservatives, they actually, you know, go on 50% of, you know, bringing in women in leadership. So that would be tough, isn't it, in your constituency with these major communities, Tamils, Indians and Jews, they're all kind of male-dominated.
Politics is generally a male-dominated arena. Community politics is changing slightly. We do see more women coming to the forefront, but again, it is in the guise of women's groups or women's issues, and that's really important. But you know, you need to see more women on a level playing field with men in just positions that don't require a women's group. So, for example, if you think of the president of a society, you instantly think man. You shouldn't. You should think, oh, it could be a woman too. And I think my candidacy is starting to shift attitudes in Harrow as well. People are pleasantly surprised that it's a woman, pleasantly surprised that it's a young woman, and quite happy that it spreads quite a powerful message to not only the women there, but our next generation as well, saying, look, you can do that, you can be this person, there's nothing you can't do.
So let's move on to national issues. So nationally, what is the most important social issue for you? And if you just were to explain in kind of in a few words, what kind of impact or what do you think should be done?
Socially, we still have far too many people living in an unequal country. We have vast pockets of inequality in this country. We have people that can't afford to heat their homes. So, for example, Harrow, which you'd think of as a leafy suburban borough, we actually have the highest amount of fuel poverty. There's people that can't pay for their winter heating bill or can't afford to heat their home and living in a cold house. We have people relying on food banks. Again, as Tamils, we have an abundance of food. We're always looking forward to different cuisine and different things on the menu. But there are people that literally can't afford to eat. They're going to their local churches or synagogues or mosques or community organisations and holding their hand out for food. This is in 2015 in Britain. These things are existing in our society, and that's just absolutely not right. And this is the government's responsibility. So that is
you can't say this one government's responsibility, because over the years it is kind of no one. I mean, there was three parties being in power, at least coalitions or others, but none of them couldn't change this. What do you think the underlying reason? Because it's not just one party politics issue. It is. Yeah, it is absolutely. We can't tolerate this, especially child poverty. I think there are a considerable amount of children below poverty line. But you cannot actually stack this against one party or anything. It's just the whole structure. What do you think about that?
Definitely there needs to be some change within our infrastructure to stop people falling into these poverty gaps, to find out actually why is it that some people fall through the net, fall through the system and are having to endure these hardships. But at the same time, I think not apportioning blame to this government is also letting them off lightly. We've had the rise of food banks in this country is phenomenal. That's a single issue that's happening under this government. Yes, there were food banks in the Labour years, but nowhere near the level we're seeing now. People are actually relying on that as their sole means of getting food. This fuel poverty thing, we had a pensioners allowance, we had a winter fuel allowance. We still have that under this government, but it's been cut back slightly. So more and more people are falling into that trap. And it's a case of looking at the system and looking at the country and finding out what the country needs. And at the moment, far too many people are being let down. But along with the social issues that you mentioned, my big passion is our NHS. And sadly, it's on its knees in this country. I'll go back to Harrow again for that. We have the A&E, where the hospital, where I'm a radio presenter. The A&E there has the longest A&E waiting times in the entire country. It's the only hospital where if you ring 999, your paramedic has to call into the A&E to check that they even have space before they take you in. This is in 2015 in Britain, in a country that we think is wealthy, that we think has a place in the world. We cannot even let people that ring an ambulance go into their local hospital because it's so overpressured.
So that the inequalities and especially the NHS is going to be the key for you. But internationally, what would be your kind of priorities? I know an MP's remit actually sets within a constituency, but nowadays it's kind of the reach outs internationally as well. Emergence of social media and so on. There might be questions on international issues as well. So what would be your priorities in international issues?
It's almost obvious. My first and foremost priority internationally is talking about Tamil rights. I'm a Tamil. The reason I'm in this country is because my parents fled a civil war. They were lucky enough to come to Britain at a time when this country opened its arms to anybody coming from Sri Lanka, any Tamil citizen coming from Sri Lanka, to offer them amnesty. But much has changed since my parents came here, and so much has happened. It's one of the biggest shames of every government at the moment that what's happened in Sri Lanka has been allowed to happen, and that actually it's a small group of loud individuals that are making the case for it, but it should be the priority for any government going forward, and certainly for me as well. So it's about talking and finding a cause for an independent international investigation into war crimes, holding people to account, answering this question of whether or not it's a genocide, bringing this all to the forefront and having a very, very strong voice for it. And it's not something that I'm averse to working with politicians across the spectrum, because for me, this is an important issue and it's not something that we can be party political on. It's a matter of human rights, it's a matter of people suffering, and it's basic humanity. You know, we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about it on a national scale and keep talking about it, keep putting pressure on it, because if we don't, nobody else will.
And in fact, to add a little bit to it, that it has set a precedence, isn't it? Other countries to follow that, in the sense that it's okay to move on. So if you share this experiences internationally, because if you really look at, there's awful things happening internationally with ISIS emergence and other countries actually doing the same way of tackling resistance in a way. So would you say that it is important, like, the international issues are tackled? Because partly we spend a lot of money on international issues, because unless that is sustained, our tax money is going to be wasted on international issues. So do you agree with that?
Britain has a very important place in the world internationally. We might be a small country, but we're quite mighty when we speak. And I think if we speak about certain issues, it definitely gets a lot of attention and it makes other countries follow suit. So with something like what's been happening in Sri Lanka and the aftermath, it certainly isn't okay for anybody to say it's all right to move on, because you tell that to the mother who can't find her son. You tell that to the child who's lost their parents and hasn't got a limb because of the war. You tell that to the thousands of missing people who are never accounted for. That's not right. That's not justice. That's not basic humanity. It's not okay to move on. Yes, we must talk about how we go forward and how Tamils there can live in peace without fear of persecution, without a fear of being victimized and castigated for what happened in those years. But at the same time, we can't say, oh, well, it's happened and let's go forward. There needs to be some justice for what happened in those times. If there's an investigation, let all sides be investigated. We're pretty clear about that. But to say it's done and dusted and let's move on is the wrong thing.
Because we are here in the 60 years later talking about a similar issue, because 60 years earlier Jewish people went through the same thing. We all said never again, and the UN was established, never again, and then we still talk about these issues time and time again. So is there something wrong in the international sense? Because we could have protected the world afterwards. I mean, in the sense, what happened to the Jewish people in Germany?
Like I said, our place in the world is very important, but you can't stop some events happening. What you can like to think is that people learn from the lessons of the past. But what we're seeing now is new things forming. So yes, we might have learned, or other countries might have learned lessons from what happened, but the problem is continually evolving. We're living in a more globalized society. We're closer to our neighbors than ever before, and there are some frictions and there are some tensions that haven't been ironed out. I mean, the Middle East has been an age-old problem, and it's successive governments from around the world who've let this fester, and we've got to where we are. And now something like ISIS is an international problem. We can't just say, oh, it's for Iraq to deal with, or we can't just say it's for America to deal with. It's all of our problem, because we're getting homegrown terrorists flying out there and joining these groups and then wanting to come back and perpetrate terror in their own countries. So internationally, we have to look at why certain groups are feeling marginalized in society. You can quash a regime, but you can't quash an ideology. So you have to get to the root of why that exists, and you have to find out why people have certain views. I mean, sometimes something like ISIS, I wouldn't even know where to begin with them. They are barbaric, and you almost can't account for why they're doing that. But at the same time, to ignore them isn't the solution either, and to say bomb them to high heaven might not be the solution either. You have to look at how you stop it going further.
To find the root cause of the problem.
Definitely, and that's a huge task, and it's a task all governments have to take on. Britain can't do it alone, America can't do it alone. You have to work together. Sometimes the UN can be frustrating on instances like this, but it also has an important place, an important role in this as well. And we can't just say, oh, they don't do anything and move on.
Yeah, tell me about the experience with UN, but that's one of the only system we have at the moment which can actually play a role. So finally, we live in a multicultural society in modern Britain. We're celebrating this 800 years of Magna Carta, the kind of the democracy we actually cherish. So what message would you like to give it to the youngsters, like, watching this program? There is a world out there for you, whatever, especially women.
Yeah.
Youths.
As someone who still thinks of myself as relatively young, I would say, go out there and be who you want to be. society wants to shape us in certain ways. Our families might want us to do certain things, but only you know what's right for you. Your British identity is one of many identities you have. You can be British, you can be Tamil, you can be a woman, you can be a member of a different party, you can be gay, you can be straight, you can have various affiliations to football. Identity comes in a very, very complex number of areas. Some people want us to define ourselves in one way or the other. You know, that's their problem. For us, we can be who we want to be. Everyone has a place in British society, and it's our responsibility to get out there and get involved and get active. So just as active as we are on Tamil issues and human rights, which we rightly should be active on, also find out what's going on here. You know, find out what your local issues are. Find out how your local hospital is doing. Find out if your local library is due for closure, or whatever it is that you're passionate about here. Get involved. You know, it might not necessarily be political. It might be something to do with the Royal Lifeboat Society. It might be to do with World AIDS Week. There are a number of things that you can be socially active on here, but it would be wrong not to be, because it's our place in the world to be that way. We can all turn a blind eye to things going on around us and say, well, that's not my problem. But I think part of what makes us great, part of what makes us British, is that we have an ability to care for one another. We care for our neighbours. You know, if someone's fallen over on the street, we'll help them and we'll pick them up. That's part of living in a cohesive society. And I'd say go out there, own it, be yourself, be who you want to be, but at the same time get involved and, you know, don't let other people make decisions for you. You can make your own decisions to have your say.
So don't let other people make decisions for you. You know, get out there. You have a place in modern Britain, and this is a message from Kumaran. Uma, thank you very much.
Thanks
It
for
was
having me.
nice talking to you in the conversation. Hopefully, we'll see you again after 7th of May.
Well, here's hoping. I'll be back here on the 8th of May, maybe.
Get out there, own it. There is a place for you in modern Britain. That's the message from Umar Kumaran today. Thank you very much for watching Conversation. Goodbye.